welcome to the second annual Southern Forum. We are obviously doing this virtually in this rather extraordinary year, 2020, but we very much look forward to 2021 and being all together. I'm particularly excited about this morning's plenary panel. When I think about leaders who lead with boldness, with authenticity, and with compassion, I think of the four panelists we have on today. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome these four esteemed diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders to Southern Forum. I'll let each of you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourselves, and then we'll get right into the conversation about doing DEI work in the Deep South. Let's begin first with someone who's a friend and a personal hero, Sandra Evers-Manley. Sandra, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, and what a wonderful welcome. Good day, everyone. I'm Sandra Evers-Manley, Vice President of Global Corporate Responsibility and President of the Northrop Grumman Foundation. I'm truly honored to be here and look forward to this amazing discussion as it's all about us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sandra. And Jennifer Ogle, welcome to the Out and Equal Southern Forum. I know this is going to be your first time, but I hope not your last.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Deena. I'm Jennifer Ogle, a proud native of Tennessee, and now been living in the Mobile, Alabama region for most of the last 20 years. I work for Airbus as the head of employee relations for our North America region, and previously held the title of Global Head of Inclusion and Diversity for Airbus Group, based in Toulouse, France. So I'm so eager to share experiences and stories with this panel today.
Thanks so much. And Ben Hasan, a longtime friend of Out and Equal and of our Southern Forum work. Welcome.
Thanks for including me. I'm Ben Hasan. I am the Chief Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Walmart, Inc. We are residing here in Bentonville, Arkansas, and I, like the rest of the panelists, excited to be here and to have this conversation. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben. And lastly, Michelle Fullerton, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thanks, Deena and team. Michelle Fullerton, my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm proud to be one of the diversity and inclusion executives at Bank of America. I support our consumer and small businesses. And I'm also the co-chair of our LGBT+ Executive Council, as well as an HR exec. So really proud to be here and talk about this important topic. So thank you.
Terrific. And again, thank you all. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the very nature of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work in the American South. All of you have national reach in your roles. And I'm wondering, how is it different to roll out and support DEI efforts in the American South as opposed to other parts of the country, or even if, for those of you who really truly have a global reach, what are the differences and similarities to the American South that you see elsewhere in terms of the portfolio you oversee? And so I think I'll start with Ben and Sandra on that, as you are, of course, renowned, globally known DEI leaders. Let's get real about doing this work in the Deep South.
You know, let me just say, you know, when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, no matter where you go, there are differences. You know, I'm from California, but I currently live in Washington, D.C. So I could be in the South, I can be in the West. There's going to be differences no matter where you go. I think what makes the South a little different is that, you know, again, it also may depend on your workforce. You know, we may have a large manufacturing workforce versus a more professional workforce. So there's differences no matter what. I really don't like to sort of separate. You know, I think when I go to work every day, I think every employee, our LGBTQ+ employees, want to be treated just like every employee. And so I think, you know, in the South, we've got work to do, but I will say even in the West, where some people say it's much more progressive, there's work to do. I think what really makes a difference is, do we have that right culture in place? Do we have that organization where no matter who that individual is, or like I say, whose that individual is, that they feel included, they feel welcome, and they feel that sense of belonging. I believe in the South. I grew up in the South with Sometimes my family is a civil rights family from the South. So there's work yet to be done in the South, but I will say, as we have seen, as it relates to social injustice in our country, there's work to be done everywhere.
Thank you so much. And I think you just touched on something. We can't take anything for granted, including the sort of conventional wisdom or even stereotypes that, oh, the Californias have figured it out, the Manhattans have figured it out, but not the South. And we too, as Out and Equal, we absolutely believe in the South. So thank you, Sandra, for kicking us off with that. Ben, what are your thoughts? What has to happen to really make LGBTQ inclusion stick in the South?
I think at the end of the day, particularly for corporations like ours, this is a leadership issue, right? And the more the leaders are talking about this notion of inclusion and creating a place where everyone feels comfortable, welcome, and safe to be who they are, they're going to perform at their highest potential in that environment. As I think about our footprint, we've got 5,000 stores across the US, and about 2,400 of those stores are in the South. 1.6 million people who work for us, and about 600,000, almost 700,000 in the South. And so the work, though it's difficult everywhere, we try to do the work the same way everywhere. And to Sandra's earlier point, we have a really strong presence of our LGBTQ plus group on the West Coast. Very strong presence, but we also have a very strong presence right here in Bentonville, Arkansas, which would probably surprise a lot of people. We try to connect the groups together. We have a large group as well in the New York, New Jersey area. And so our ability to connect those groups in a way where they could support each other across our nation, we think is critical in terms of continuing to do the work. And I said, I'll close where I started. At the end of the day, inclusion is a leadership issue. And when leaders are talking about it as part of their strategy of their business, when they're saying, we want this to be an inclusive place for everyone, the organization will begin to incorporate that as part of their culture.
You know, what both of you have just touched on to me speaks to some of what we talked about in our opening today, which is that there's a lot about the South that might surprise folks. The fact that the largest population of LGBTQ folks in this country are working in the South. The states with the highest rates of LGBTQ parents in the South. And so some of these coastal stereotypes, they're just flat out wrong. And I am curious, you know, both Jen and Michelle, at different times in your career and in your lives have moved to Southern states. What has been your experience, and what, if anything, surprised you, either for better or worse?
So as people can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from the South, as Deena said. I'm actually originally from Scotland, and I came to the States via New York. And when I chose to remain in the States and make this my home, and I'm now a proud green card holder, I really thought about where did I want to live, where was going to feel like home for me. And luckily worked for Bank of America and had the option to check out and ultimately then choose to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. And for me, it was the culture, the people, the weather, the warmness, not just of the weather, but the people, the food, the hospitality of the South that really drew me. And it made me feel like I had a home in the States. It felt like home to me. And I had to balance that, though, as an out gay leader, with the fact that the very first question people asked me when I was leaving New York, which is known to be, you know, such an LGBT plus inclusive city, you know, so safe to walk around, you know, as an out LGBT plus person, with, you know, walking with your partner's hand and whatnot, was why? You know, why would you give that sense of safety and well-being up? And my answer was because I can help drive change. Because the more we have out gay leaders living their authentic lives in the South, and the more our leaders, and to my previous panel members' points, talk about LGBT plus issues in the South and make it a more and more open and welcoming place, the more we'll just, you know, take that culture of warm hospitality, warm weather, and phenomenal cooking, and we'll also have that warm welcome for all of our differences. So for me, you know, I'm a Southerner by choice. My family in Scotland laugh at me because I say y'all and all sorts of other fun things like Bless Her Heart. And it just feels like home to me, and I've been embraced here. It's definitely not without its awarenesses and concerns for LGBT plus people. And I'll tell one quick story before I hand it back over. As I mentioned, we have an LGBT plus executive council, and we move our executive council summit around the country every year. And last year was the time for Charlotte, North Carolina, just because it happened to be where our management team was. And we always try to align so we can have our most senior leaders come speak to our LGBT plus teammates. And for the second time, we had a transgender focus. So a whole day to bring together our transgender teammates for networking, development, support, and sponsorship by their LGBT plus teammates. And I had many of our transgender teammates call me and say, Michelle, am I going to be safe in the South? What bathroom can I use in the South? You know, what do I do? So I do think there are some really important nuances, and we must remember to bring our whole community along with us whenever we're making progress. So for us and all employers, it's not about saying, okay, so don't hold events in the South. It's about saying, okay, what are the unique challenges that parts of the LGBT plus community may have? And how do you overcome those challenges and provide that warm, inclusive welcome? And for us, it was as simple as choosing a Marriott hotel. And we all know that Marriott is a proud LGBT plus ally. And they, we talked to them, they assured us that our transgender teammates would be welcomed, valued, included in their establishment. We chose restaurant partners for the events that made the same assurances and warm welcomes, so that we could have that really warm, hospitable welcome for every single one of our LGBT and T plus teammates who joined. So a little bit more, but Jen, over to you. Thank you.
That's an awesome story. My journey is similar. I wound up in Mobile in 2000, working in a largely blue-collar manufacturing organization as a supervisor, where I was not only the first woman to ever manage this group of people, but they had never seen a gay woman do it before. And I discovered that through my own journey, I wanted them to get to know me first, and then they would discover who I was as an LGBT person. Secondly, because it's easier for people who have maybe never been around an LGBT person to see you as a person first, and then they discover the other layers of you. And that turned out to be a very good decision for me personally. As I joined Airbus, I realized that in Mobile, we have a vibrant community. And as we began to get more mature around bringing visibility to our LGBT community inside the company, I realized that right here in Mobile, we had people just waiting to be asked to participate in an employee resource group around, celebrating being LGBT. And our Pride ERG in Mobile is the second largest in the country. And when we started our North American Pride group, Mobile was the first one to raise their hand and say, what do you want us to do? We are working with local community partners here in Mobile to make sure there's visibility to LGBT youth who are struggling, to LGBT professionals who want to be visible in the workplace where it might not be as open, where it might not be as mature. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing, but it starts with just being able to be humble and to step out and say, this is who I am, I'm no different than you at the core. And it worked out well for us here.
Thank you so much, Jen. I would love to actually go back to something that Michelle raised, which to me really puts a fine point on it. While we have so many diverse companies operating across the South, we have so many LGBTQ people, these are also by and large the states that lack basic civil rights protections for the LGBTQ community. And of course, a reminder that we don't yet have what's known as the Equality Act, which would finally ensure federal consistent protections. But when we think about the American South, apart from Virginia and some other local statutes, we're talking about that swath of the country where a trans person's safe and respectful access to the appropriate restroom is not guaranteed. Where a family like mine, if my wife and I moved to my moved back to my mom's home state of Alabama, our family could be denied a rental home simply because a landlord doesn't want to rent to our kind of family, and there's little to no recourse there. So we can't have two rose-colored glasses when it comes to that backdrop. And at the same time, so many of our partners, you all in the private sector, have created these, they're like little bastions of equality where people can bring their full selves to work. And we hear again and again from our community, you know, I haven't told my parents, or I haven't told my best friend, or I can't be out in my faith community. I've got to be closeted at church or at the temple. It's really only at work that I get to be my true self. And so I want to ask a really basic question here, which I think for some is a bit controversial, but you know, do businesses have an obligation to lead this type of culture change?
Absolutely. And from an Airbus perspective, we need to be more political. We need to put more pressure on not only the local communities in which we live, because guys, let's face it, we put billions of dollars into the local economy. So we have the ability to put pressure on local elected officials, state officials around making sure our employees live in a safe and inclusive environment. And it's easy for me to say that. It's more difficult to actually do, I realize. But I do believe that we have the ability as private employers to put this kind of pressure on local and state government, and we should.
Yeah, and this is Sandra. I will just say this is, again, a leadership issue. You know, our company, when we left California and moved to Virginia, there were certain laws that we had in California that didn't exist in Virginia. I will just say, you know, our company, we've signed on to various amicus briefs as it relates to LGBTQ rights, policies and laws. And again, it starts at the top. It's really about that tone. You can't be one way inside the company and not speak to various issues that may discriminate against LGBTQ plus community. So I will say that our chairman and CEO, both current and present, has been very visible on our commitment for our LGBTQ plus community. We have sent letters to various communities and states when there have been various laws that go counter to our commitment to our LGBTQ plus community. So we have an obligation, and it's important. It's about that tone, that leader being visible. And I'm very proud to say we have made those inroads, and we must continue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And what I also hear in both of your responses is that the center here, the center of gravity is our employees. You know, where can they thrive? Where can we ensure fairness for them? Ben, I know, you know, for the last decade plus that I've gotten to work with Walmart, the centering of the workforce, the centering of the communities in which you operate, and, you know, alignment around your DEI values is paramount. We at Out and Equal were particularly excited when you all rolled out the option for all of your customer-facing folks at your different stores. You gave them the option to actually have their pronoun pins there. And it is not an exaggeration that that might create a space for a truly life-saving conversation. For that trans or non-binary kid who's been scared, who's not sure how they could even talk to a parent or a grandparent about their identity, when they walk in a store and mom notices these pins and says, do you know what those are about? And then that child gets a space to really talk about it. That's extraordinary. And so we really, we as a community are grateful for this level of leadership, which I imagine also reflected some strategic business decisions. And I'm curious if you can expand on, you know, how is it that, you know, our country's largest retailer is also, you know, promoting this level of visibility and inclusion with respect to pronouns?
Yeah, you know, I actually think this whole discussion and issue around including versus not including people, it's a fundamental business issue. I mean, we are in a war for talent, regardless of what business we're in. The competition is steep for customers. And guess what? Intelligence, ability exists in all walks of life. And we actually want the opportunity to tap into it wherever it resides, regardless of who you love, regardless of your ethnicity, your gender. It really shouldn't matter. We want those customers, and we also want those folks to come and work at our company. They bring a great value and a great innovative approach to the work when they feel like someone cares about them. So that's fundamental to us. Now, I will tell you, for several years, we would get requests from members of the LGBTQ group about their badges. And, you know, their names has changed and people are calling them the wrong pronouns. And so there was an associate in the store who, an hourly associate who sent a email to our EVP of people for Walmart US and said, hey, how about we have some pins? And so we were like, what? And they were like, yeah, you can like put your pronoun pin right by your badge and then people would know who you are. So the request came into my team. They turned it into kind of a competition of who can create the coolest pins. We decided, okay, this is the set we're going to use. We posted all over social media and we got a response that we were really surprised by. I'll be completely honest how surprised we were. We packaged them up and mailed them out to the locations that were interested in the pins. And then they're also available in our company store where we sell lots of Walmart paraphernalia, the Spark and Sam's Truck and all of those kind of things. So, and now they're available to buy at our company store, or if a location wants a bag full of them, we'll package them up out of my office and send them off. I mean, sometimes it's just the little things that leaders do that make people say, this is the place for me. I just think that this notion of inclusion and how it's baked into the associate life cycle from the time you are on campus or recruiting experienced hires until retirement. If inclusion is embedded along that life cycle, who you hire, who gets promoted, how are people compensated? I just think it makes your company better. Businesses today have a responsibility, I think, to do good in society while actually running a good business. And I think there's been no more important time than the time we're living in right now for companies to stand up and take a stand.
And hey, Deena, I'll just jump on what Ben shared, because we also have pronoun name badges at Bank of America. And one quick story I'll share is we thought we might need to do a bit of training and support, you know, for the teammates of the employee who wanted to wear the pronoun name badge. And what we found instead was similar to Ben and Walmart, that we had these amazing heartwarming experiences where a transgender or gender expansive teammate would ask for the pronoun name badge so that they were not misgendered by our clients. And then everyone in the whole center would say, well, we want to wear a pronoun name badge too, because we want to, you know, be part of supporting our teammate here. So that sense of inclusion, it just, you know, keeps going up and up. When you offer teammates, you know, these small but significant symbols. And I'm obviously wearing our flagscape, our rainbow flagscape today. Again, small but significant. And the funny story here around leadership is when this came out, we were told it was to be, you know, just like a tie pin or some sort of less visible symbol. And then our CEO and chairman, Brian Moynihan, went on Bloomberg wearing it as a lapel pin. And hence the Bank of America flagscape lapel pin was born. And we were all like, phenomenal. Now, because the boss has worn it, we all get this really visible way to show our company's support and inclusion. So those little acts of inclusion just really carry on.
And Sandra, I'd love to also turn to you because, again, for somebody just kind of casually aware of all things LGBT in the workplace, it might surprise them that one of the world's leading, you know, aerospace and defense firms is also a DEI leader, and specifically a leader for the LGBTQ community. Can you just shed some light? You know, how did this happen? What were some of the moments of challenge and success after?
Well, first of all, I would just say to everyone, what we're talking about today is about culture. And it's about being responsible to our employees, all of our employees. It's also about creating that place where everyone feels safe and included. So our DEI journey, it's been a journey. I'm not gonna say we've been there from the beginning. It started first with a policy, a sexual orientation policy. But I will just say, so we've been on this journey to be a very inclusive organization. Do we still have a lot of places, way to go? We do. What I'm very proud about is where we are with our LGBTQ plus being a very inclusive company. We've got an incredible employee resource group called Prida. That group has been very vocal, it's been very visible, and it's been very bold. For example, bringing forward that we want our pronouns on our badges, talking about those safe spaces. Is this space safe? So one of the things that I will say when we talk about leadership, we do an employee survey every year. With that survey, we dice it up. We by race, by gender, sexual orientation. And so a couple years ago, we looked at our LGBTQ plus community, and we weren't happy with what we heard in that survey. And so we've got a Diversity Inclusion Leadership Council, which is chaired by our chairman and CEO. And at that time, our chairman and CEO said, I'm going to lead the committee to go out and do focus groups to meet with our LGBTQ plus community to learn about what do we need to change within Northrop Grumman. And so I will just say at the highest end of the corporation, leadership has been out there with focus groups with our LGBTQ plus community. Things around badges, restrooms, having a transgender toolkit, having partners to help when we've got employees who are transitioning. So it has been a process, but it all comes back down to leadership and it comes down to culture. So what I like to say, it starts with that tone at the top. And then we've also got to understand what's happening at the middle, because it's not enough to just have that tone at the top. It's also about that mood at the middle. What are our middle managers are doing? And then really understanding the buzz at the bottom. So if I go to the South or if I go to California, what are we hearing at our respective sites? So it's been a journey, but it's been a good journey. It's one that we've had to listen. It's one that we've had to learn, but most of all, it's been one that we've had to act and bring about change. And I will say from our law department, who's been very visible in helping us with various amicus briefs, it's become a great partnership. And it's really about, for us at the end of the day, it's about innovation. Right now, we're dealing with COVID.
Right.
Any community, we might find that individual who can help us. And so we cannot afford to leave anybody behind, and we cannot certainly leave anybody who feel that they don't belong. It's really about how do we perform, and that performance starts with our people, our greatest resource.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And I actually just got chills for a moment because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking about actually an important morsel from Ben's story, which is that the original idea for the pronoun pins, it came from a store associate. You just talked about everyone belonging. And what I would say to our attendees today, and this is going to be a bold statement, if your leaders are not infusing this sense of the fact that everyone has value, everyone has a perspective to offer, a thoughtful recommendation, knowledge about their own experience in their own community. If you're not hearing this type of leadership, I'd say to hold your leaders to a different level of accountability, to really learn from today. One of the things that's so compelling about the whole arc of the LGBTQ inclusion movement that all of you are a part of is also the role of engaging allies. Allyship is certainly something that can be practiced across all kinds of lines of difference. But as a sort of almost identity, it seems to have really had staying power for the LGBTQ community, so much so that a lot of corporate DEI efforts have really, articulated ways to engage allies, their value within the company. And so I'm thinking about Bank of America's allyship program, and I'd love, Michelle, for you to talk a little bit more about, the hows and the whys of it beginning and the effects as you've seen it on the company.
Yeah, no, thank you. Look, how it began was actually similar to all of these great stories with employees, this time in London, saying, hey, we should have an ally program. This is what we think it should look like. And, asking at that point our LGBT plus sponsor, Kathy Besant, to support. And of course, she was like, of course, when you want to launch, I'll be on a plane. So she, personally flew over from the States to launch our ally program day one, which again, that's the power of leadership, which is a consistent theme today, because when you have, one of your management team members who gets on a plane to launch your ally program, it shows the company that, the business of belonging means business. So that was our start. And, it started with simple things like, let's give people a sticker so that either on their computer, on their desk, whatever it may be, they could show visibly, I am an ally. And again, show that visible connection. Then we got more and more sophisticated. And what we have now is we have this amazing ally sort of intra website that people can use, and you go on and either as an out at work person or an ally, and it's got you and it's got your immediate team, it's got your whole sort of department or your whole location, and it shows you everyone that's out at work or an ally, in your team, in your location, in your wider business area. So for people who are traveling, for people who are thinking about a new team, a new manager, it's this amazing tool to be like, wow, if I joined that business, I would have, 10 allies in my team already. Of course, I'm going to belong there. So it's a really easy and powerful way for people to get that signal of you belong here, you're valued, you're included, who you are matters to us. And it's been incredibly successful. We every year sort of get more and more allies. We're at about 30,000 now, and growing by the day, and they are hungry to be more and more active. They're always asking us, what can we be doing more? So this week we have a lot going on around transgender awareness, and lots of great sessions so that our allies are allies to the whole LGBT plus community. So it's been a real phenomenal tool for us, and honestly it started as simple as some basic branded stickers and some programming, and then now we have this sort of complex great technical tool that helps people.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Sandra, what do you think of, whether just in a very human sense when you think of the word ally, or also in a more structural sense within a company?
That ally is that person that's going to speak up. They're going to be there for you. I will give you an example. I really believe that within Northrop Grumman, our LGBT plus community really brought home what ally means. And we've seen that this year with the George Floyd killing. When we had Pride Month this year, our LGBTQ plus community basically said, you know what, this year it's about really making sure that our Black employees are cared for. Those are allies. Those communities came together and had conversations. They walked hand to hand. And so that ally is someone that's going to look out for you to know that I'm here. I'm in your community as an ally. You can call on me. I'm there to help speak up and be there. I am an ally, and anybody within Northrop Grumman will let you know at the highest end of the corporation, I will make sure that if any issues brought forward or any ideas that our LGBTQ plus community brings forward, it's just like I'm in that community as well. So that ally is going to be that champion. They're going to be that supporter, and they're going to help to make sure individuals get the resources that they need. And most of all, they're going to bring forward those issues that they may see. So that ally is walking hand in hand. And for me, it's it's like family to support our community.
Thank you so much.
You notice I said our community.
You did, and it is so appreciated. Quite realistically, there was a time where even some of the best straight allies in the world would still shy away from the royal we, and so it means a lot. And it also means a lot that part of what I'm hearing is, for example, the white LGBT leaders within Northrop said, this is not a time for celebration. This is a time for reflection and allyship. and stepping back and giving other people space. And I think what you're also then leading us to is, how do people develop a sense of common ground with someone who is different from them? But then what's that secret ingredient or that process that gets it from we're different to, wow, your fight is my fight. I'm as invested in your equality as you are in mine. And Jen, you gave some really interesting anecdotes from your career about what it meant to kind of transform colleagues from just colleagues to friends to allies. Can you talk a little bit about what common ground has meant to you in that context?
Well, I think the way that I experienced it in my own life was that I found out that no matter how different we might be in terms of how we were raised or educated or any religious upbringing or any social, socioeconomic experience, we had more in common than we were different. And like I referenced before, when I came out to these individuals, then it was, okay, but we know you as Jen, and we love you, and you're our leader, and the fact that you're gay makes no difference. And that may sound small to many people at the session today, but in the Deep South, where people are often not exposed to people that are different from them, and where many divides still exist, regrettably, today around race and socioeconomic status, it is a big deal. And, you know, I was thinking a lot about what Sandra was saying, and the power of allyship is reflected in the power of the culture in the organization. Because the stronger the ally presence in an organization, whether it's for LGBTQ people, whether it's for people of color, whether it's for people of a different ethnicity, nationality, then we all feel like we belong and we all feel connected in some way. And that's the main thing we're trying to get across in our company. You know, as you guys know, in the aviation industry right now, we're struggling and we're suffering like many industries due to COVID. But one area where we're growing, which we're very happy about, is in our location in Mobile. So one of the challenges we have is to make sure that we are demonstrating that inclusivity, that allyship that we have, not only for LGBTQ people, but for everyone, so that everyone knows who Airbus is. And I believe that, as Sandra said, yes, it starts at the top, but it's got to be at the bottom and in the middle, so that everybody knows that I have responsibility to be that ally, to make sure that I'm cultivating that culture of belonging, so that no one enters our company without knowing their own personal responsibility of being part of that culture, of being a safe and inclusive place.
Exactly. Thank you. And, you know, the headlines this year, reckoning with race and racism and racist violence in this country, COVID, certainly LGBTQ milestones. You know, we had a huge Supreme Court victory. We still have a ways to go. There are people, of course, affected by every single one of these. 4 in 10 LGBTQ Southerners are also people of color. And when we look at the initiatives that all of your companies have invested in, we see the recognition of diversity broadly. And then I think those of us on this panel are also saying, well, let's also bring it to this intersectional space, that the first generation Mexican-American woman who also happens to be bisexual doesn't have to choose which one ERG she belongs to or which one group she belongs to. She belongs to multiple. And I'm curious if, you know, particularly Ben, Sandra, Michelle, if you want to add to this, you know, all of your companies have these investments in place, and what do you see as critical to the success of promoting intersectional inclusion at work?
We have to address people's hearts and minds. And in many ways, many Americans have been sold a story of separation around race, around religious beliefs, and around personal beliefs. And I think that leaders need to understand that we've all heard those tapes. Those tapes are playing in our heads. Our our brains, where our unconscious bias lives in the fast side of our brain, we're making decisions with those tapes every day. We talk about this in terms of how do we get away from a compliance approach to the work, where you're worried about the laws and you're worried about getting sued and you're worried about what your reports look like. How do you shift to a neuroscience and a social science approach where you're educating leaders on how their beliefs are affecting people in the workplace? Mm-hmm. So if the neuroscientists say that when we experience difference, most human beings' reaction to difference, their first reaction, is almost always a non-inclusive one. And it's how our brains, because we're looking for patterns, and when we don't see the patterns we expect, our first reaction is to draw back. It's in our DNA, and you can't avoid it. But leaders need to understand that's what their brain's doing. If you spend 95% of your waking hours in your fast brain, then you're making decisions with those unconscious biases all day long. The neuroscience, when most people hear bias, they think bad. The neuroscience say, no, if you get a good result from an unconscious bias, it's actually a good unconscious bias. You get a bad result, it's a bad one. And you can actually rewire your brain to pause when you experience difference and not react to that first action. So that's part of what we're trying to teach leaders. And this matters most along the life cycle of HR, mm-hmm. right? Who you hire, where you recruit, who gets promoted, who gets compensated versus not. So we're trying to teach leaders that. The other thing we're trying to teach them is this history, because there's a history of laws that have been created in this country that affects all of these marginalized groups in a way that we just accept it because that's the way the laws was written. You already mentioned this, Deena, about the laws that exist that leave people out. Well, the country was built on a set of laws that have left people out. And one of my favorite authors, Brian Stevenson, says, until we're really to have some truth telling about how we become so situated, there won't be any repair, recovery, and reconciliation. So I'll close by saying this: we have to talk to each other. We have to spend more time talking to each other, and we have to give each other grace. My mother, God bless her soul, she passed in 1984, but when we sat down at the table, you didn't eat until you said grace. Now, I'm not trying to preach religion to anybody here, but what I'm saying is when you invite someone different to your table to talk about the issues that might affect you differently, you got to give them some grace, because chances are they're going to mess up and say something they got no business saying. And they may be in a position to actually help you with the work. But if you just chop their head off because they said something you didn't agree with, then guess what? They're not going to come back and help. So we need everybody at the table, regardless of your personal beliefs, to create an inclusive environment and actually begin to be educated about other people's beliefs. I think we got to take more time talking to each other.
Thank you so much, Ben. I love this point about giving each other grace. The nature of seeking out allies and being an ally, the nature of it is that it's imperfect and that we're all growing and evolving. And if we can't forgive each other in that journey, then I'm just not sure how much longer we can go on together. So I really appreciate that. Sandra, it looked like you had a thought come to mind as he
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with Ben more. I think one of the other things I would say, I often tell individuals, sometimes we've got to make hard decisions, and then most of the times we should be making heart decisions. And this is really about the heart and how we make people feel. And I just really believe at the end of the day, it's really about how do we create those spaces of learning, the space of listening, and the space of leading, and the space of lifting. And if we do that right, it means that if I'm a Black female, that's LGBTQ, I'm going to be valued for who I am. And so it comes to what is our value system? How do we value individuals in that intersectionality? But it's really about that heart. It's really about the lifting, the leading, the learning. And I really believe it's at the end of the day, it's about the loving. I believe that I want to be felt that someone loves me. And at work, I may not use that word love, but at least you're going to value me. You're going to value who I am and what I bring to the table. And I think we need that now more than ever. I think with COVID, if we can't be more giving, if we can't be more loving, And if we can't be more lifting and more learning, then something's very wrong. And now more than ever, we cannot continue to discount anybody. It's really about how do we make everyone feel of value.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And Michelle, was there something that came to mind for you?
I keep coming back to something that we've done that's really helped all of our employees sort of come together to connect over difference, and it's something called Courageous Conversations. And it actually started with one of our queer Black teammates who came to our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and said, I see too many people who are part of my Black African American community and my LGBT plus community who are being victims of violence. And then the next day I'm expected to come into work and I'm expected to say everything's okay and get on with my job and perform and excel and, you know, be a great teammate. And I'm not okay. So, you know, when are we going to start to have those really hard conversations? We have the foundation built now. We have this great, you know, global diversity strategy. We have ally programs. We're more advanced in our, you know, DEI journey in some ways. So is now the time that we get to talk about the difficult stuff, who we are, how we belong, what the barriers are that we're all facing, you know, outside of the safe spaces we're creating in all of our workplaces. So we started Courageous Conversations. We talked about issues of racial injustice. We talked about belonging, you know, exclusion, LGBT plus, what it was like to be Asian American, what it was like to have, you know, children, all different topics. And we started a few, and then now it's become just part of our culture. So when Keith Lamont Scott was shot in Charlotte a couple of years ago and we had civil unrest, the first thing we did was we had Chief Putney, who was then the Chief of Police, and local civil rights leaders come together with local leaders from Bank of America and say, okay, let's have a courageous conversation. How do we heal together as a community? What's our responsibility as one of the local, you know, large employers in the community to bring the community together to heal, to understand the issues and the systemic injustices, but also to have these courageous conversations and to move forward together. So, and what I always tell people is a courageous conversation doesn't have to be, you know, a big panel with chiefs of police and, you know, amazing civil rights leaders. It can be a couple of colleagues where you say, hey, you know, let's get our employee networks together, or, you know, it's Transgender Awareness Week right now, you know, maybe 5 of us should get together and figure out, you know, what we don't know and how we could learn from each other and what more we could do to be allies to our transgender teammates. So courageous conversations can be tiny and in small groups, but they can obviously be hugely impactful, especially in the South, where there is just a little bit more of a culture of, you know, there's certain things we don't talk about. We don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion. And actually, especially in the South, we have to talk about politics and religion. We have to talk about the inclusion of belonging. And we have to talk about the systemic barriers that still exist for our communities of color, for LGBT plus communities, for all of our communities of difference, and how we can all be part of, you know, breaking those barriers together. So courageous conversations would be my key thing for folks in the South to start to do in whatever way you're comfortable in your company.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I especially love your point that a courageous conversation doesn't have to happen on stages or on, you know, executive, in executive platforms. There are daily decisions we can all make to be more courageous with one another. So thank you so much for that. Well, our hour has nearly flown by, and certainly these conversations are going to continue throughout the day today and over the course of the year, as we're going to be releasing even more resources and testimonials of the power of this work across the South. You know, this has been a tough year, and yet we have found resilience, we found community with one another. And I'm wondering if I could ask each of you, what gives you hope as we head into 2021 and beyond? What gives you hope for creating and growing cultures of inclusion and belonging across the South?
I was thinking about that as you were speaking, and I was thinking, yes, 2020 has been a very difficult year for us. I mean, certainly you have the COVID in the forefront, you have injustice at every turn with people of color, people in marginalized communities, and just people that are perceived as different. But, you know, I think that that gives us a platform and has given us a platform for coming together because we're all experiencing these hardships at the same time. They're running a really cool ad right now in Alabama that the Department of Public Health has put together that talks about your responsibilities around COVID, masking, social distancing. And it talks about how COVID doesn't discriminate. If there's one thing we've learned, COVID doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone. So it automatically gives us this common platform for where we can come together and say, how do we make sure that as we come out of this crisis that we've all experienced, some worse than others, you know, surely, but that we've all experienced this crisis, how do we come out stronger? How do we enable it to strengthen our workplace culture so that we're even more connected coming out of it, where we understand each other in a better way, in a more intimate way, in a more unique way, to where we can be even stronger as one. That's at least the culture we're trying to build at Airbus, where we are truly one. And it's not about differences, it's about the commonalities that we have. So that's what we'll drive moving forward. And that's truly what speaks to me and my heart. So it's an easy thing for me to connect with.
Thank you so much, Jen. And Ben, what gives you hope right now?
The power of the human spirit, the power of human beings gives me hope. The fact that though in today's society, where everyone can be a news reporter, anybody can be a news reporter in this society. And so what we hear mostly is the power of the extreme positions. And I believe most of America doesn't live in those extreme positions, but they're just not as loud as the extreme positions are. So I believe that as we continue to listen to each other, as we continue to lead where we are, we all have a responsibility to lead where we are. And then as we begin to learn more and more about each other, that gives me hope that we will survive this like we have survived so many other things in this country. The last thing I'll say is my youngest son is 33 years old. And so we've been having this interesting conversation where I'll say, you know what, son, 20, 30, 50 years from now, someone will write books about 2020 and George Floyd and the pandemic and the unrest in the street. And he teases me all the time. He goes, Dad, 20, 30, 50 years from now, they may not be writing books anymore. I'm like, whatever, son, whatever, however we're documenting history. This is going to go down in history. And my hope and prayer, specific to your point, is that corporations in particular will come down on the right side of history. That's the other thing that gives me hope, is that corporations have actually stepped up and said, we have more than a responsibility just to the shareholder. We have a responsibility to society. And I think for the first time in my almost 40 years in corporate America, corporations are taking a stand. They're using their voice in a way that makes complete sense for me in the day and time that we're living in.
Thank you so much, Ben. Sandra?
You know, I was thinking it becomes an affordability issue. We cannot afford to let today be better than what tomorrow will be. We've got to create a world where everyone feels so valued and so included. We cannot afford to only look back and not learn from what our troubles are today. And it begins with each of us. Inclusion begins with us, but it also begins with me. And it begins with those very small acts that we can do. We need the conversations, but sometimes we just need the hello. And sometimes we need just the how are you doing? And so those small acts of inclusion, those small acts of belonging will create greater tomorrows. And so I would just say it all starts with us being more, having empathy, being more loving, more giving, and most of all, more understanding.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And Michelle?
So what gives me hope is the power of one. So it only takes one great manager to create an inclusive team. It takes one colleague to ask a teammate, hey, how's your kid getting on at school right now? And to discover that that child is transgender. It takes one new teammate to welcome an LGBT plus person to the team and say, you know, why don't you join our virtual Zoom happy hour with your husband? And then, you know, as other panelists have said around the power of companies, you know, we've had the power of 1 billion. So we've made a Bank of America $1 billion commitment to tackle racial injustice in all of its forms. And what our CEO has said, which really does give me hope, is, you know, part of that 1 billion and part of, you know, his hope for our company's focus is that this will not be a moment, this will be a movement. And that really gives me hope. We all have to work together to make sure that this is a movement, and it's a movement that moves us all forward together.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Sandra and Jen and Ben. We would not be able to have the LGBTQ Southern Forum workplace if we did not have you and the incredible paths that each of you has blazed and continues to lead. So thank you so much, truly from my heart, and also from the entire Out and Equal team for kicking us off today. It's going to be an extraordinary day of sharing of best practices and learning. So thank you again.